Our first speaker is Bianca Bart. Her and her father have been in paper money for years and years. They have executive currency. As a matter of fact, their new book out, 5th edition, Paper Money Errors, is out. You can buy it at Whitman or I guess at Wizard Supply, I suppose.
Buy it at Wizard, you can buy it from us, you can buy it anywhere, it's Amazon, eBay.
They have a table, you can buy it from them. But it's a great book to have for paper money errors. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Bianca Bart. And I will get out of here.
Thanks, Tony. I'm going to leave it for now if you don't mind, and I'll give you one after if that's okay with you. First of all, thank you so much for coming. Genuinely, I really appreciate it. The Fun Show wholeheartedly is my favorite show of the year, and I don't say that lightly. Last year, I had 42 shows on my calendar from around the country. So with that being said, being in Orlando, first of all, coming from Michigan, any excuse to get out of the snow in January, I will take. But even more than that, to go on the bourse floor, there's so many great things out there, which means I know what you're missing by being in here. So I really do appreciate you taking some time to come in here to learn about paper money errors. If you think this talk is on conservation, you're going to be quite surprised. Unfortunately, if you were coming into this room for that, Tom Walker was unable to make it. So we're gonna have some fun on paper money errors as long as our tech is cooperative here. Maybe. Uh-oh. Well, I guess that works. Here we go, perfect. So who am I? Why am I at the front of the room? As Tony mentioned, I was fortunate enough to really grow up in the hobby, what I like to call a diaper dealer, meaning I have really been on the bourse floor since before I could walk it. So with that being said, I'm incredibly passionate about our young numismatists, do a lot to really stay involved, to make sure that our next generation is set up for success. I love it, I absolutely love it. So anything I can do to keep people excited about it is certainly what I wanna do. But I didn't exactly have a straight path here thanks to my dad. I knew that this is what I wanted to do. I loved it my entire life, and as soon as I graduated high school, I said, Dad, I'm so smart, I'm 17 years old, I know everything I need to know about life, and I wanna get right into the industry. Well, hindsight's 20/20, and I'm so thankful that he said, no, sweetheart, you need to take a pit stop first. So I spent 4 years at Michigan State, had the opportunity to play some hockey there, and then stayed with the sport. Turns out I was much better with a whistle than I was with a stick, and had the opportunity to work everything south of the Olympics. So I was part of the 2026 Olympic class. Obviously I'm here and not in Italy, so you know where that story ends. But with that being said, really excited to see some of my friends on TV in the next few weeks here. Told you you've been into it, been interested my whole time through college, and then even shortly thereafter, spent some time at PCGS, helping them grade and of course authenticate. To this day, still serving as a consultant to all 3 of our paper money grading services, particularly on topics of error notes, right? As you know, there's a lot of deception that's happening. So sometimes we have to go, is this legitimate? How could this have happened? As I talked about, being a mentor is something that I'm incredibly passionate about. I was fortunate enough to grow up with phenomenal mentors, and I still have many of those today. So I'm part of the P&G Next Gen program. Those of you that are familiar with P&G, I am really proud to say that I was the 3rd youngest member to get accepted in that, following Q David Bowers and Lynn Knight. So got into that as a full member just before I turned 21. Kind of keeping with the theme, I'm also on the board of the Michigan State Numismatic Society. How did that happen? Because I said, I love kids. Let's do more. And they said, come to the board. And I was like, wait, hold on. No, that's not what I was saying. I was just saying, I'd love to volunteer. Let's do more for our YNs. So incredibly passionate about education. That's what my degree was in from Michigan State. And I am a firm believer in remaining a student of the industry, a student of the hobby. So spent a couple weeks in Colorado Springs this year at the ANA Summer Seminar. Took Coin Grading 1 and Coin Grading 2. Oh my God, it's entirely different than paper money grading. Wow, I was the dumbest person in the room. I'm not afraid to tell you. So if you're a little bit intimidated by errors right now, no big deal. I know exactly what you're feeling. Kind of going into that mindset, I said, I just want to be more confident and more competent. I didn't go into those 2 weeks going, God, I really hope PCGS or NGC offers me a job. I knew that wasn't going to happen. And so I'm going to ask that we keep that same mindset here today. I can't turn you into an error expert in 60 minutes, but my goal is to make you get a little more confident, put some knowledge in you, and just make you be able to navigate the bourse floor a little bit easier. As Tony mentioned, I'm now running executive currency. My dad has pretty much retired for the most part. You'll still see him popping around, usually the A&A and the fun show. Unfortunately, he wasn't feeling well enough to attend this one, but I'm sure he's excited to go to Pittsburgh in August. And I was lucky enough to tag team the 5th edition of our Paper Money Error Book. So he wrote the 1st edition in 1994. Was a bit too young to help him out with that one, but put those 4 editions out by himself, and then this one we just came out with a few months ago now. So we're going to talk a lot about how our paper money is made. But before we get into how it's made, it's important to talk about where it's made. Because I will tell you, we all have pet peeves, right? Let's not pretend we don't. And when I have somebody, particularly a dealer, that's talking about, here's my mint errors, here's my mint errors, and they hand me a stack of paper money, I cringe inside. Probably on my face too, because I'm not really good at fixing my face in these situations. So it's very important to me that you leave this room knowing that paper money is printed and not minted. Just like the mint, there's multiple locations. Our BEP does have 2 different facilities, one in Fort Worth, Texas, and then the other in Washington, D.C. As we go through and really focus on how our money is made, we're going to kind of zoom in on 3 main concepts. We're going to talk about the paper, we're going to talk about the ink, and then we're going to talk about the process. And as we go through these, what we're going to do, the first half of the presentation is really going to be the nuts and bolts. We're going to see what's going on at the BEP, we're going to understand how the money is made, and then the second half, we're going to put that knowledge to the test. We're going to show you some errors, and I put that in quotation marks on purpose. And then we're going to see, can we apply that knowledge that we used to figure out if these are genuine or not? So we really want to make sure that we're kind of looking at all of this as a detective. I always say be skeptical, ask the questions, when could this have happened, how could this have happened? And if you can make sense of that, we're probably on a good path there. Our first paper money was printed by the United States in 1861. As much as I would love to sit here and talk you through almost the last 200 years, it'd be a very long conversation. We'd have to have dinner together. That's a lot to cover. So what we're going to do is we're going to just focus on 1928. Reason being, that's our first year of small size. And we're going to stop it at 1996. Why? Because that's when technology starts to come into play, and we make a lot of changes. The other thing that's really important is during that time frame, that's when most of our errors were made. We think about the technology aspect. We know that as our technology is continuing to improve, fewer and fewer errors are being released. And then as you notice, or maybe some of you that are already into error notes, you go, why are there so many from 1974 to 1976? Was everybody sleeping on the job those 2 years? What happened? Well, nobody likes spoilers, so sorry, I don't know what to tell you, it's coming. But the reason being is we were testing out some new equipment at the time, specifically our COPE, our overprinting process. We were just trying to be more efficient. As we learned, because of the number of errors that came out in that time frame, we didn't exactly put out a great product. So if you do start to see that and you start to connect those dots and you're like, man, there's a lot in that time frame, you're absolutely right, and that's why. We were just testing out some new equipment. So we said we were going to talk about paper, we were going to talk about the inks, and then we were going to talk about the process. Now, our BEP doesn't go on to staples.com and order this paper money, right? We have to get it from one supplier and one supplier only. That supplier is now known as Crane Currency. They've been Crane & Company my entire life, so now I have to look at the screen to make sure I'm giving you the right information here. They're based out of Dalton, Mass. They're an exclusive supplier for us. Our paper money is comprised of a cotton linen blend, and the reason that's important is as we start to get into the application of this, if you notice a paper, if you've ever seen a piece of paper money that's kind of bright white, and you're like, ooh, this doesn't feel right, this doesn't look like the money in my pocket or my wallet, how did that happen? Why did that happen? Again, red flag, time to be a detective. We typically are going to expect to kind of have that creamy color paper because of this cotton linen blend here. The other thing that's really important to note is that our papers, our notes are not printed one bill at a time. That would be such an inefficient way to do it, right? That would just take a long time. The government's here to make money. They're here to get as much paper money out as quickly as they can. So rather than just doing one note at a time, what we do is we have these large rolls. That's where our money gets printed, and then eventually that gets cut and distributed into individual notes that we're able to spend today. So sometimes you're gonna look at a note and you're gonna have to really zoom out and think, where was this on this sheet? What else could have happened to this sheet? Sometimes the story is outside of the note itself. So just remember, when we're thinking about a specific note, it's okay to zoom out sometimes, because there is a bigger story that comes with it. Keeping with our timeline, we're gonna kind of cut it right in half. The reason being, it's just the easiest way to deliver this. It could be modified to each and everything that happened prior to it. But if we start right in 1957, that's when we started doing our 32 subject uncut sheets. So for the sake of this talk, that's what we're gonna focus on. We do know, of course, that we had 6, 12, and 18 subject sheets that came out prior to that, but this is what we're gonna focus on. And when I say 32 subject, if you're not familiar, if you come from the coin world or you've never heard the phrase before, what I mean by that, and I know it's a little bit difficult to see on here, unfortunately, but 32 subject just means there's 32 notes. That's all that means there. So we think about our inks next. Paper, ink, process. Those are our 3 bullet points for today that we're gonna focus on. Our ink, where does it come from? What is it? Well, it's a proprietary blend, not only of pigments, but also for extenders as well. The extenders really serve the purpose of stabilizing that ink, making sure that once it is applied to the paper, it stays on there. This way everything doesn't fade. We wanna make sure that it stays there, it adheres well. How does this ink get to the paper itself? The easiest way to explain it is a series of big containers and multiple tubes. And that ink runs through the tubes and eventually it makes contact with the printing plate from there. The one thing that's really important to note when we're talking about the inks is that even though we know, if you think about a dollar bill today, the back of it's green, all right, that feels good. And then you know that there's some green on the front too, right? That's where our serial numbers and our seals come from. Those inks, even though it seems like they're the same color, they come from a different supply. They come from a different container or vat. That will become very important later on. So just because it's the same color doesn't mean it's coming from the same source. Each printing has its own supply. And you may be thinking, why are you telling me this? I promise it will make sense. We will connect the dots shortly. So when can errors occur? Might feel like common sense, but maybe not. Can happen at any point during the time our money is being printed or in between any of the stages as well. And we're gonna see some examples of that as we push forward. So we've talked about paper a little bit. We've talked about the inks. Now let's talk about the process. And if we were to break this down in kind of 4 simple steps of it, we know that our money has to be designed. Then we have to engrave those plates. And of course, then we print it and cut it. We're gonna focus on the first 2, and we're gonna watch a short video. This way you'll stop hearing from me, change the voice up in the room a little bit, and kind of show you what it looks like from the designing and engraving standpoint before we tackle the printing and the cutting.
And sketches from artists who work together with the engravers who will create the final plate. Next, skilled engravers intricately etch the design by hand using an engraving pen called a pantograph, painstakingly replicating the design onto a printing template called a master or steel die. This entire process can take up days to complete. However, these dies are not just ordinary steel plates. They are chrome-plated to endure the immense pressure and precision required for printing. These plates are also made to integrate another security feature called microprinting. Every part of the design, from the portrait on the front and the vignette on the back, along with all the hand lettering and embellishment, are composed of minuscule lines and dots. Some of these lines and dots depict microscopic text strategically placed across the bill. For example, taking a closer look at a $100 bill will reveal the phrase, "The United States of America," printed along Benjamin Franklin's collar, and USA at the bottom of his portrait.
Quick show of hands. Anybody know that the United States of America
America was there on Benjamin Franklin? couple people did, most everybody didn't. I'm not afraid to tell you I had no idea until I saw this video. Like, I had no idea. The concept of micro printings, of course, as we talked about, having to improve our technology today, because we know that counterfeiting is such a problem, it's such a detriment. I'm also part of our anti-counterfeiting task force. So we're having a lot of international issues, if we will, and saying, how can we make this more difficult? And that's why we're seeing so many design changes, especially if you think back to some of our older series, think about those large size notes. And it seemed like almost every year, we're changing it up. Why? Because we had to figure out how in the heck we were gonna combat the counterfeiters out there. That's the real purpose there. So today, fortunately, we've been able to implement some technology to help us out. Now, our money, we're thinking about our process of how our money is printed, and it's really printed in 3 different steps. And those of you that are ready for the advanced class, you may be thinking to yourself, no, Bianca, that's not true. Hold on, smarty pants, we'll get there in a minute. So first thing that happens is our back of our notes are printed. Again, remember, we're not just printing one note at a time, we have a full sheet here. In this example, this is a 50 subject sheet, one of our newer ones. Oh, I'm sorry, nope, this is a 32. 50 is coming later. But, so our back printings get done first, all the greens on the back. Then we do our face printing, that black border portrait on there. And then last but not least, those of you in the master class, you know I'm calling it the 3rd printing, but you know it's actually 2 steps on that overprint. So our black and our green are gonna get applied separately. And we'll talk about that in a little more detail as we move on and focus on that overprinting process. So after our back printing happens, then we have to let the notes dry for 3 days. Why? Because ink is wet, and if we just touched it, it'd smear everywhere. Being an error person, I would love that. Are you kidding me? Don't let them dry, just touch them. Let everybody wipe their hands on them. The more dramatic, the better for me. But no, so the BEP does put them in drying for 3 days, which is kind of a random fun fact. Who doesn't love trivia? Which means that at any point you go into the BEP and there's about $300 million of paper money at various steps of the printing process. So a lot of money just kind of hanging out, waiting to be brought to completion there. After it's had 3 days to dry, we know the backs are dry, what happens next? Well, it didn't occur to me until I had like 6, 7 people at 2 or 3 shows, and they just kept talking about how they thought they thought the presses were disassembled to put new plates on. They thought we just kept using one press in the BEP. And I was like, what a concept. Do you know how inefficient that would be to have to disassemble the press every time? So if that's what you're thinking happens, let me kind of clarify that myth for you. That's not what happens. Again, we're a government facility. We need to be efficient. It would take way too long to disassemble a press and add a new plate each and every time we advanced along the printing process. So rather than the plates changing, simply the sheets get moved to a new press that's already set up with those plates. So we have the back printing. We know it's dried for 3 days. Now we get the second printing, which is our face printing, as you can see on here. And then what happens? Well, now it's time for our first inspection. This was a job that was historically reserved for women, which is exactly why I did pull 2 kind of older pictures from the BEP records and put them on the screen for us to see. Today, again, keeping with the theme of being more efficient, of utilizing technology, just like many jobs out there, we've started to replace some people with technology. Now what we utilize today is what we call an OCIS, which is an offline currency inspection system. That is essentially a dual-sided scanner. So remember, we have full uncut sheets. They slide across this scanner. It's checking the bottom, it's checking the top, and rather than analyzing it as a single image, it breaks it down into 4 million pixels, and it's processing that at a rate of 2.5 seconds. We know that we simply can't always replace humans, so we haven't completely taken them out of the equation. We still do have this manual inspection, this kind of human intervention, if you will, about every 500 sheets, just to make sure things are running as they should. We can't be totally reliant on that scanner. So we have the back, we have the face, they've passed inspection, now what? Well, This is where our first step in the cutting process happens. So again, we're thinking about this as a 32 subject sheet, meaning there's 32 notes on there. We chop it right down the middle, and we make two 16 subject sheets. But we're still missing something, right? We haven't put the serial numbers and the seals on there yet. So we take those two 16 subject sheets, and now it's time for us to apply the overprint. And as I mentioned before, even though we talk about it as the third printing, it's really 3 and 4. Or as we break it down in our book, we call it 3A and 3B. So each color is applied independently with the way that our intaglio printing and our letterpress works. We cannot do them simultaneously in this era. If you're thinking about our colorized money today, yes, we do print in multiple steps at the same time. Thinking about everything prior to 1996, being mindful that we're staying within that time frame from 1928 up until 1996, we have two different steps here. So our green ink goes first. That gives us our treasury seal and our serial numbers. And then that second application of our black ink is where we get our district seal and those district designators coming on. So we have our 16 subject half sheets. They're now completely printed. Everything looks as it should. It's time to cut them. We have these guillotine-like blades that come down, and now our 16 subject half sheet gets chopped into 8 uncut pairs. Well, that'd be great, but we all know that we don't have $2 bills at the same time, right? 2 of them. So we have to cut them again. And here we are again. They get chopped one more time. Now we have 16 individual notes. Efficiency seems to be the accidental theme of this topic, or of this talk. So the BEP is not running these one at a time. If you can make sense of this, I just ask you to process that sheet, multiply it by 100. And the reason for that is that's now what gives us our full packs. So when we chop them, they're already nice and ready to be bundled into a full pack of 100 consecutive notes, and then eventually bundled into bricks. But are all notes cut at the BEP? Anybody see an uncut sheet before? If you've seen an uncut sheet, then that tells us they're not all cut there. Yeah, you've seen one? Yeah, you have one. What denomination? Is it a 1?
I got ones and twos.
Ones and twos? Man, I gotta hear about your collection after this. That sounds awesome. So we know that not everything is cut at the BEP, right? And I'm sure the BEP would like me to give this plug. If you're looking for an uncut sheet, you can find them right on their website. But that tells us as error collectors that we need to be extremely cautious, particularly when we're thinking about cutting errors or cutting errors. And the reason being is because it could have been cut from a sheet. How do we know? How can we tell? Well, sometimes we really do have to go down into the Treasury Department records and see, was this released as a sheet? A lot of the times, an easy way to tell in many cases is a high serial number. So if you see an error note that starts, 99, 98, some sort of high serial number, and it's a cutting error, probably released as an uncut sheet. So be very cautious if you decide to buy it. More than likely, that was a man-made error. So again, high serial number, time to be a detective, doesn't always mean that it was released as an uncut sheet. But if we're thinking in those modern times, yeah, my red flag is up for sure. All right, trivia question, don't use your phones, I know it's so easy. How many times do we think a plate from a 32 subject uncut sheet gets used at the BEP before it's replaced? What do we think? 5,000. What do you think? 100 times? All right, what else? 100,000. I'm gonna entice you. Whoever gets closest without going over gets a book. Woo, now we got some hands up. One time. What do you think back there? 5,000. Another guess? 1,000? 20,000. 22,000. 50,000. Another guess? 30,000. 35. Oh, do I have 40? Anybody else want to get some last minute guesses in?
Just guessing $1 million.
Go ahead.
It says $1 million.
$1 million? All right. 250,000? 200,000? 500,000? Yes, sir.
250,000.
250,000?
350.
350? Or 350,000? 1,000? 350,000? All right, last guess. 100 million. Yeah, why not, right? Oh, they just keep using it. It's still the same. No, I'm just kidding. Who said, you said 500,000, didn't you? 800,000. That is the number of times. There you go. Yeah, of course. So just shy of 1 million times, which is a lot if you think about it. But if you remember back to the video that we saw, them being chrome plated allows them to be sustainable. That allows us to continue to have those impressions. So it's always fun to think about. One of the things that I didn't touch on, but I should, is as we're thinking about our printing plates and we're thinking about our printing plates coming down and making contact, it's happening under 20 tons of pressure. So we talk about the possibility of a plate fatiguing under 20 tons of pressure. It was just mind-blowing to me that it could almost go through 1 million, right? That I can't even comprehend that because that's just so much wear and tear on it. So this is where I say we get to have fun in the second half. The first half, sorry, it is what it is. We have to nerd out. We have to get down and dirty and talk about the BEP. But the second half, we start to kind of put that into application and say, how would I do if I went out into the real world? If I walked the Bourse floor today or I sat online, would I be buying bad errors? How can I tell the difference? And this is what we're going to get into. I'm a firm believer in what I like to call error education through error immersion. Sometimes you just have to put the notes in your hands. You're going to make mistakes, right? That's the reality of it. But the goal here is to make sure you're not making the same mistake twice, number one, but also to hopefully reduce some of those mistakes that you're making out there. When we talk about errors and we talk about kind of some of the language surrounding whether errors are genuine or not, you may hear a few different phrases: genuine or altered, real or fake, good or bad. And a lot of times when we're talking about that, we're talking about whether the error itself was created at the BEP. We're not talking about whether the host note was created there. Very, very rarely are there counterfeit notes that have an error on them. If you think about it, the people that are making those counterfeit notes, they're just trying to spend them. They don't want to draw any more attention to their bad notes than they have to, so they're not putting errors on them, right? So if you think about it, good versus bad, real or fake, a lot of times we're just talking about the error themselves. But to kind of streamline our language as we jump into some examples, I'm going to ask that we use two different words. We're going to use buy, and that says, yep, I'd buy this. As a dealer, I'd put this in my inventory, or as a collector, I would buy this for my collection. And then that second option there is bad, and that says, nope, this was made after it left the BEP. So as we go through, we're going to see some that we're going to determine, do we want to buy it, or is it bad? Excuse me, the first one that we have on the screen here, what do we think? You look at it, buy it, bad? Buy. Who said bad? Couple bads. Why do we think it's bad? What stands out to you? The green ink, we don't like the color of it, or what don't we like about the green ink?
Don't like the color, I like whole smear.
Okay. Who says it's good? Who says I would buy this? Why do we think? Anybody want to be brave and talk me through why you would buy this? You want to be brave? What looks good to you?
I mean, since it's a proprietary blend, I mean, it's going to be hard to smear the ink after the fact. And also, you know, if they're drying for 3 days, who knows what could happen in those, like somebody bumps the sheet and it gets smeared, or maybe there was like extra ink was extruded from one of the sheets or something.
Yeah. Nope, you're absolutely on the right path there. So we just had too much ink applied. Those of you that think it looks like it's the wrong color, the reason being is because we're seeing so much of it layered. That's why it looks dark. As it starts, we kind of have a gradient here. So as it starts to slide up to the top margin or smear up to the top margin, that green up there looks like everything else, right? This is a genuine error. This is one that I bought, and it's either in my inventory or was in my inventory not that long ago. Yes, ma'am?
Would the ink be raised? As in, would that be entirely opaque? Would it feel raised if you run your finger through it?
Really good question. It would not. And the reason being is that in order for us to get those engraved areas, the way that, or those raised areas, is because we think about our plates and we think about them being engraved. And we talked about the 20 tons of pressure coming down. When that happens, that's what squishes our paper into those recesses, and that's where those raised areas or embossing comes from, right? So we've heard about embossing before, we feel it. That's exactly where that comes from. Because this is not an engraved portion, we're not gonna have that raised. Really, really good question.
Does the blue in the upper right corner bother?
Does it bother me? I love that you noticed it. Does it bother me? Of course, I wish it wasn't there. But the reason that I actually chose this note for the presentation, of course, there's a million ink smears I could have chosen. That was one of the reasons I picked it. Because of this up here, some people will like to put what I call distractions. They say, hey, look over here. You know this didn't happen at the BEP. Be careful. This was just what I like to call an unfortunate victim of life, right? Nobody put this on there with the intent to be deceptive. How did it happen? Why did it happen? Your guess is as good as mine. We could spend all night coming up with why this note picked up some blue ink, but what we do know immediately is that didn't happen at the BEP. So if you do see something that feels a little bit off on an error or what you think might be an error, I know it's tough, ignore it. Even if that means you have to put your thumb over it, put your hand over it, don't let your eyes get pulled to the wrong spot. People do that on purpose. No, it's hard to believe, bad people in the world, right? I don't mean to rattle anybody in the room, but they do it on purpose sometimes. Not what was going on here, but really, really good observation. Let's see what we think about the next one. Is this something that if you were a collector or you were a dealer, you would buy it? Or would you run away from somebody's table? Who says I'd buy it? Anybody say, absolutely not, Bianca. I'm not taking a risk on that. Yeah? What don't you like about it?
Well, the front and the back are printed separately, and yet they have the same mark.
Same mark on there? How about you? What stands out to you that goes, that doesn't feel good?
I don't really know much about errors, but it just doesn't look like it happened at the BEP.
Yeah.
To me, it looks like somebody else did it. I don't know, it's just a gut feeling.
No, 100%. Instinct, that's a real thing, right? Absolutely. Yes, sir?
It's a star note,
Okay.
which means it had to have been purposely put into the sheet.
Yep. So we know that stars, in most cases, replace errors. And the reason I say in most cases is because, particularly thinking about our modern production now, we do release stars at the end of a series, so they're not always replacing errors, but definitely. So that's actually one of the reasons that I picked this note as well, is because it is a star note. This is a gutter fold. It's a genuine error. Gutter folds are incredibly common. You're going to see them all over the Bourse floor if you take the time to walk it, and I would encourage you to do so. But how did it happen on both sides? And I know that's what kind of goes, how could this have happened? We talked about it being printed separately. Exactly right. The paper was folded, and because we think about the whole process, we can tell a lot from this note. What I can tell you is if I only look at the back design, and I pretend this picture isn't here, to make sure I don't fall off the stage here, only looking at the back design, I know that paper was pleated prior to the back being printed. How do I know that? Well, because it was folded, it got printed, we opened it up, and there's the white void. But now I can look at the front, and this tells me a cool story too. It stayed folded through the second printing, which is our face design, right, that black that we saw, and it stayed folded through our third printing, which is exactly why our serial numbers are intersected there. So when you see an error on both sides, yep, time to be suspicious by all means. Because, well, just because. That sentence can end there. But in this case, we can make sense of it. Our two questions we come back to all the time when we're looking at errors is, when could this have happened? Well, we answered that, and how could this have happened? We answered that as well. So genuine gutter fold error, you're going to see them all over, but definitely something worthy of talking about. Let's look at our next one here. What do we think on this one? We're going to buy it, or is it bad? Who says I would buy this? Couple, maybe, we're not so sure. Who says absolutely not, it's bad? Looks a little bit faded. Unfortunately, I don't have a picture. You say it's bad? What's standing out to you as being bad?
It looks like it might have been washed out on the ink.
Okay. So we're thinking somebody may have done something to take those serial numbers and seals away. Anybody? Yes, ma'am.
The cutting on the sides are different.
Okay. Are you saying, so we would call left to right or top to bottom? What's looking? Left to right. Looks like the margins aren't quite perfect there. Okay, that's true. Yep.
So there's a second thing that could have happened, and it's that the power shut off and the it started moving before the ink turned on, and the ink got printed onto the second dollar bill. So that dollar bill has the two difference.
You're very smart. We're going to come back to that in just a second. I'm going to put that in a parking space for just a minute, all right? And I promise we're going to get a chance to go through it. You're going to see a lot of errors that look like this, or certainly some errors that look like this. And if you're going, anytime you see a missing print error, I always say, what does the surface look like? You need to know what the surface of the paper looks like. If it has been abraded, meaning somebody has done this with it, yep, probably didn't happen at the BEP, right? That's somebody that's decided to be a chemist on their own terms. Sometimes we do have chemical alteration. People will quite literally remove some of the inks from it. We're going to see an example of that as we move on. This note in and of itself is absolutely genuine. How do we know? Because if you can see to the, well, on your left here, we can see a little bit of the district seal. We talked about embossing, 20 tons of pressure coming down. This is what we call a blind impression. How does it happen? It happens one of three ways. If you've ever been printing something at home on your computer, your printer decides to throw a fit and it sucks in two pieces of paper at the same time. Usually that brings out some colorful language if you're anything like me. But what we know when that happens, that top piece of paper is what gets the ink. That bottom one just gets scrunched and kind of brought along, but no printing happens there, right? Same thing. In most cases, when we have this, exactly the same. Two sheets get sucked in together by the rollers. They both are going to get the embossing, 20 tons of pressure. They're both getting pushed into the recesses of the printing plate, but only the top one got the ink. That's how this note happened. How do we know? Because again, and it's a little bit tough to see here, but we can see the district seal fully embossed. We have a blind embossing of both the district seal as well as the district designators on this. So we're thinking about, is there any surface disturbance? Nope, there isn't. The one thing I will tell you when it comes to a missing print error is be incredibly cautious of those on legal tenders. The reason being is that red ink, we talked about chemists, we talk about people with these kind of deceptive intents. Red ink is the easiest to remove. So you might not see that same kind of surface disturbance that you would on a Federal Reserve note or on a silver certificate. So just be mindful of that. Those of you that say, I want to jump into legal tenders, I'm not saying there's not genuine examples out there, because there absolutely are. But red is the easiest color to be removed. So be careful with that. So, yes ma'am?
So with the entire sheet of those, of that series, or
Yeah.
would have not been, but, sorry.
No, you're doing great. I've got it.
Would not have been, would the whole sheet have been without the serial numbers?
Most likely. The only possibility would be, again, just like we talked about with our at-home printers, if for some reason, when those rollers came together, if it scrunched it. And then in that case, part of the sheet may have received the overprint. But in most cases, yeah, they feed together, they go together. So all, in this case, 32 subject or all 32 notes wouldn't have it. So we could call it an obstruction. Yeah, that would technically be the right way to classify it. The grading services have now switched their nomenclature and they're calling it missing print errors. Reason being is that that's kind of an umbrella term, and they sometimes don't know the difference of two sheets getting stuck together or it entirely missing. And that's one of the other ways that it happens. I'll come to you in just 1 second, sir. So we talked about two sheets coming together. That's a possibility. Second way that these missing print errors happen is they just don't advance to the next press. We're humans, we make mistakes. Oops, we forgot to get the serial numbers and seals on this one. No big deal, just cut it and send it out, right? Sometimes that happens, and exactly what you were saying here is that sometimes we shut our presses down in the middle, right? You talked about kind of a power outage, but for some reason, our presses may be malfunctioning. And while it's not ideal to have to shut them down in the middle, that does happen. Incredibly rare, but in those cases, part of the run will receive it, and again, everything advances. You had your hand up, sir.
So when the sheets receive the third printing, is it 16 or 32?
16. Yep, so it gets...
So it'd be 16 notes affected, not 32.
Yes, sir. Did I say 32? Oh, well, I appreciate the correction. Yes, 16. Good question. Yes, sir.
Why would the inspection have got that?
Well, this was in the time frame of manual inspection. So today, we know probably going to be caught. Back then, maybe the sheets were still stuck together at that time, right? And so as they're flipping through, maybe they didn't notice it. We could ask that question about each and every error note, right? How did it get out? I'm just so thankful they do, or I'd have nothing to talk about. We'd just be up here staring at each other today. So this one is a genuine example. This one was graded by PCGS as GemNew 65 PPQ. Again, I either do have it in my inventory or recently had it in my inventory. The next one I'm going to show you, this one comes out of my inbox. Get a lot of email inquiries from both collectors as well as dealers. This one came with a really fun story, and it said something like this. Hello, ma'am. I know you know something about errors. My son found these really 2 rare errors, and he sent me like 42 attachments. And I was like, for just 2 notes? Great, I have nothing else to do. I'd love to go through all of them. And sir, I'm sorry if you're in the room. I'm just kidding. But this video came with it. This is one of the 42. Fortunately, I'm not going to show you all of them. Watch this video and make your determination on whether you would buy this or whether it's bad. You have to pay close attention here. I'll play it one more time because it happens a little bit quick. How many of you would buy these very rare dual-sided error notes? One? Anybody else?
I would only buy it from certified.
You'd buy it if it was certified? Okay. Play it again? Absolutely. Who says I would not buy this? What's standing out to you? If you look at this and you're going, I would not buy this because I don't think it's a genuine error note, what is the first thing that your gut says, oof, this doesn't look good? The serial numbers? I'm seeing something else too, and I got a couple of these. The cut! How wonky are these margins? This is like a kindergarten art project gone wrong. We talked about those guillotine-like blades coming down. Those are straight cuts. Even when our blades start to get dull, which we do see from time to time on the notes that they produce, it doesn't look like this. It just shouldn't ever look like this. So if you see a note with wonky margins, again, doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad, but really, really time to zoom in to be a detective. Go back to your 2 questions. When did this happen? How could this have happened? What else stands out to you? Yep.
Serial numbers on the front and back are the same.
Same serial numbers? Yep. Anything else?
They're both first printed. How does that happen? Should those machine number 2?
Yes, ma'am. How does this happen? And from everything we've learned, everything we've talked about, there's no logical way to make sense of this. Why? Because how many presses would this have had to have gone through? We know that it would have had to have seen 3 different presses. They don't stay together. We're not applying everything at the same time. You're telling me that this would have never been caught? And the other thing that I don't know if anybody picked up on is I touched on it a little bit ago, that OCIS, that offline currency inspection system that we use with that dual-sided scanner. These are newer notes. These are 2017 and both of them are 2017 A's. So these would have had to have gone through that scanning process. No way would that have failed, right? So logically, we can't make sense of it from everything we know about the BEP, from everything we've learned. It's just not making sense. The other thing that, and I know it can be a little bit tough, but it's important to note when we're talking about colorized notes, this down here in the lower right corner of our 10, this is what we call color shift ink. Same thing with our torch over there. That color shift ink should never present uniformly. And I know you might be going, you're not giving me a great quality here, and that's a very fair argument, and I can appreciate that. But even so, it looks wrong. Think about it. Think about the $10 bills in your pocket, about the $10 bills in your wallet that you've seen, that you've touched. We know it goes to that kind of copper color. It's not uniform. If I had to guess, I didn't have the chance to handle these notes in person. If I had to guess, these were probably just done on printer paper. Doesn't even look to me like they put the effort in. So terrible quality. Be incredibly cautious. Like I said, when you start to go, I can't make sense of it, there's probably a reason. Yes, sir?
So did the person who sent you the videos believe you when you told them they weren't genuine?
That's a great question. He told me how rare they were before I even got to open the attachments. My guess is he thinks that I am just absolutely full of you-know-what. I don't know. I didn't hear back from him, but maybe I should circle up. Hi, sir, just checking in, right? Yes, ma'am.
Are American bills, can you split them in two? Because on early Canadian bills, you can actually split them down the middle. You get like 2 very thin notes, and people have actually put them back together and say, oh, it's double-sided, or you only got one side, but it's like very, very thin. So is that something that can be done with American notes, to split them into front and back paper?
Yes, yep, so good question. So can our notes be split, meaning can we separate the front from the back and really kind of create 2? And the answer is yes. Thinking back to what we talked about with our paper composition being a cotton linen blend, that allows the fibers to swell. When we expose it to a moist and humid environment, what that does is it allows the fibers to expand, the paper gets to expand, and that's exactly when people like to have fun like that. So they create these kind of artificially humid environments, and in doing so, then they can split it. So you're gonna see, or if you see, and they don't come around too often, kind of dual denomination notes. Sometimes people like to make those with a glue stick or some double-sided tape. If you see something and you're suspicious, could this have been split? Backlight it. Hold it back or hold it to a bright light, and that should give you a pretty good idea of what's going on, depending on how they decided to adhere those 2 pieces together, sometimes even just taking your fingers over it, right? Another thing too, we're talking about double denoms or dual denomination notes where maybe one side is a 5 and the back is a 10. Those are very expensive notes. I can't tell you I've never bought one raw because I actually did last year at the fun show. But that was the only one I've ever bought raw. Be careful, okay? $30,000 notes usually deserve to be in a holder. So think of it that way, right? If somebody has something that good, probably you want the confidence of a grading service behind you, all right? But really, really good question. The next one I'm going to show you came from a dealer that was in attendance at the Albuquerque show. And they sent me this email and they said basically, hey, I had somebody stop by. There's something on the note that doesn't really belong there, but I looped it. It looks good. It had to be made at the BEP. What are your thoughts? What can you tell me about it? And then these were the pictures that were attached. So I'm going to ask you, if you got this email from a dealer, what would you say back? We think it's good? Would we say, hey, these are really cool, you should buy these, send them to PCGS, PMG, Legacy? Or should we say this doesn't make sense from what we know? Yeah, it doesn't make sense, right? Think about what we've talked about so far. Did we use red at the BEP? That answer is yes, of course we did. But we didn't use it like this, and we haven't used it in a long time. From what we know, in order for these red lines to have actually happened at the BEP, they would have had to have been engraved into the plate. This would have had to have been a separate application of ink. And then we're going to go and take it one step further, and we're going to say this yellow was applied as an offset printing the way we do our colorized money today. What the heck? That doesn't make sense, right? And sometimes don't take it too far. You don't need to go to an illogical extreme to make sense of something that doesn't make sense. It's okay if it doesn't make sense. This is exactly the goal here. The goal here is for you to say, I know enough about the printing process. I know how our notes should be made. No, it couldn't have happened, right? It just could not have happened. So the reason that I mentioned this and the reason that I shared that email from a dealer isn't to say, hey, look how dumb they are. That's not it at all. The point being is that error notes are such a unique subspecialty or sector of the market. It's incredibly important that if you are going to pursue error note collecting or dealing, to make sure that you are buying your notes from a reputable dealer. If this dealer had bought those notes and had sold those notes, there would have been no malicious intent behind it. It would have just been ignorance, right? And I don't say that to be rude. I just say that to caution you, because you will find error notes from reputable dealers on the floor today, because I've seen them today, that are not genuine. Doesn't mean they're bad people. We can't know everything. So if you feel like you need some confidence, start small, start with notes that have already been graded, okay? That's the one thing I will tell you. So as we determined, this note is bad, or these notes are bad. What do we think about this one here? Shows up okay. Who says, I'd buy this? I'm good owning that. Who says, nope, not for me? What stands out to you, sir?
The lines around Lincoln's hip.
Okay, some of the kind of cross hatch marks almost there that you're seeing. All right. Those of you that say this note is genuine, we come back to our how and our when. Who can talk me through how this happened?
The ink was wet. When you put the sheet on top of the other sheet, the ink was wet, still wet.
Okay, thinking wet ink transfer. You had your hand up there. Anything else to add to it?
I'm thinking it got pressed too, it was too hot, it got pressed too much, like pressure.
Too hard, so you're thinking that's bleeding through from the back?
Somehow, yes.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Yep.
I think it cuts off too.
Think the cut's off? Yeah. So it's not perfectly centered, but it doesn't look like that wonky cut, right? For sure, if this was an Unk note, no way in heck are we gonna get a gem grade out of it. The margins just aren't what they need to be to earn that, for sure. How does this happen? Offset errors are incredibly common, so it's important to me that you understand this. But the other thing I'll note is that they are incredibly common as genuine examples, and they are the most common errors that are man-made. Why? Because most of us have a printer at home. And it's not that difficult to reverse an image, okay? So how can we differentiate a genuine one from a man-made one? Well, let's step back and talk about how this actual note occurred. We've talked about our printing plate coming down and applying the ink and those 20 tons of pressure to the notes or to the sheets. That's what gives us those designs. In this case, what happened is our plate came down, it was fully inked, but we didn't have our paper there. So instead, that design gets inked onto the bed of the printing press. Now, that's just hanging out there. Now we put another sheet in, which needs its back printing. They come down and it comes together. So we pick up that mirror image on the front side. We also get the intended print on the back. So if you were to see the back of this note, it would look entirely normal. But of course, as that ink comes down first, then our sheet comes and it transfers. That's why we have a mirror or reversed image here. I talked about this offset errors being pretty frequently created. And I don't mean created by the BEP, I mean created by bad people. Let's call them what they are. How can we tell the difference? How do we know? Well, one of the easiest ways to tell is because a lot of times folks are printing these at home, they're using their printers. Those of you that are kind of in the printing world, you may be familiar with this CMYK. A lot of times when we use a man-made printer, that magenta comes through. So if you loop it, you're gonna see a little bit of a pink or a magenta hue around it. Another thing to be careful of is kind of these dot matrix printers. Sometimes you're gonna see all these little dots. And from everything we've talked about with our printing plates and from our engraved plates, we know that's not how it's done. We got to watch the engravers and we didn't see them doing this, right? They weren't giving those engraving plates a tattoo on there, creating a million tiny little holes. We know that's not how it was done. So again, be careful, be mindful. We do know that this is one of the most common duplicated errors. This particular example, as we discussed, is a genuine one. Yep.
What's the alignment like between the front and the back? Would it be perfectly aligned? The offset and the back printing, would they be perfectly aligned? Would you hold it on the line, or would it be not aligned because the paper comes in at?
Yeah, great question. Yep, no, really good question. So would it have to be perfectly aligned? No, it wouldn't. But is it gonna be pretty close? Yes, because we have alignment indicators on our sheets that tells us where to put the notes in or where to put those sheets in. So we wanna make sure we're hitting pretty close each and every time. So is it gonna be a perfect match? Probably not, right? But it is going to be pretty close. But is it possible to have it super skewed? Absolutely it is as well. Follow up, yeah.
Could you see the order at in which it got printed? So you can see, oh, this first green under there is printed under the impact wheel. Is it possible to see that?
Yes, meaning can we tell that this green offset was applied first and everything was over? The answer is yes, through magnification. As we start to loop it, that's gonna allow us to determine what it is. And a lot of times when I have to determine, I just had another note that those of you that are Coin World subscribers, you will probably be reading about in the next couple of months, that had to go through some digital microscope testing, had to go through, and we really got down and dirty and we tested the inks on it to make sure, did this happen? So yeah, there's a lot that goes into it, and in determining the correct order. The other thing that's really cool that you just kind of touched on there tangentially is we can also determine which impression the offset is. So the first impression, meaning the first one that comes through and picks up that ink, that's gonna be a lot darker than maybe the 6th or 7th sheet. And then eventually it's gonna fade away, right? There's just simply not gonna be any ink left on the bed of the printing plate, or the printing press, excuse me. So now we jump to eBay. eBay has a lot of great notes on there, but they also have a lot of cautionary tales, right? So maybe some of us have fallen victim to eBay, maybe we haven't quite yet. But my goal here is to make sure that you don't, or simply that you don't again. So we see this note here. I didn't turn the picture sideways, so don't blame me for that. All I did was take a screenshot here. What do we think about this? Using what we've learned, do we buy it or is it bad? I'm seeing some thumbs down, some very emphatic thumbs down. Why? What's telling you this isn't good? Yep.
The ink color isn't exactly the right color, and in some of the other images you can see that it bled through, and that's not very good.
Victor, come up here. You can finish the presentation. Absolutely. There's nothing else to say. You nailed it spot on. That is not the same color green that we're using. That looks to me like a bingo marker or something, right? Again, I don't know. A lot of times people will go, how did this happen? I don't know. I can tell you how it didn't happen. But how did this happen? I have no idea, but you're spot on, right? The green is the wrong color, number one. Number two, as you can see in the thumbnail of the images underneath, it bled through. That would be terrible if our ink bled through. Could you imagine having to determine the denomination and you're like, is that Washington or Lincoln? Let's hope for the best, right? No, so absolutely, we know our ink doesn't bleed through. It doesn't look right. Run away from that one. How about this one? Mismade dollar bill. What do we like? What don't we like? How do we feel?
Check the serials.
Checking the serials? What are they telling you? The serial number's telling you anything? What are they telling you? Telling that it's cut from a sheet? That's what we're hearing up front. Who says this one was probably cut from a sheet? Who says, no, Bianca, I think the BEP did this. This one's pretty cool. 4 notes on 1. I want this in my collection. Anybody? I love this. Well done, everybody graduates. Yes, so this one is definitely high serial numbers, time to be a detective. This one was cut from a sheet. Be incredibly careful. What's that? And yes, there's 10 sold. That should be another alarming, thing to consider here as we're looking. Why would you have 12 of these? Like, why? The only answer is because you have an uncut sheet and you made 12 of them. There is no other way you could convince me that you just stumbled upon them. No, you didn't, right? You made these. So yes, somebody unfortunately had a not that exciting Friday night and they decided to cut this sheet and create some man-made errors here. What do we think about this one? Another eBay example here. Thumbs up, thumbs down. What are we thinking? Thumbs up, I'm seeing some thumbs downs. Why don't we like it? Those who had a thumbs down, what stands out to you and says, no, I would not add this to my collection, I would not add this to my inventory? Anybody want to share what scares them a little bit? Reconsidering? All right, how about those of you that said, yes, this is great, I'd buy it? Why? How do you know? What tells you this was made at the BEP?
Tell it was just kind of folded over, and you can see like the serial number lines up properly, and and you can see in those images over there that there's the print is not below it. It'd be even better if the print like overlapped, and then you could really tell. But it's the right color. It's just
third printing, but correct.
Yeah.
So we're looking at the alignment, we're looking at the color. So we've started to figure out a little bit of it. How could this have happened? Our questions are when and how. How did this happen?
The sheet was folded over. The sheet was folded over that stand.
Yeah, exactly right. That lower corner was folded up. When was it folded? Our questions are how, when? When did it get folded? It got folded prior to the third printing, prior to the application of our serial numbers and seals. How do we know? Because the serial numbers and seals are on the back, right? We don't always have to take it to these illogical extremes. Like I said, it really can be what it looks like sometimes. So this is a genuine error. This is what we call a printed fold error, a printed fold over error, as some of the grading services have started to expand that a little bit. Yep.
Can we determine where this was in the sheet by the serial numbers or by whatever other numbers on there?
Yeah, so by our plate position, and I'll have to show you a better, let me go backwards here, give you a different note.
I find that unlikely to be in the middle of the sheet.
So I zoomed in just a little bit. If we look at our bottom right note down here, and we see we have part of a district seal kind of popping off, that black seal. Immediately to the left of it, we see E2. That is our position. That tells us where it's at on the sheet. So now we can start to make sense of it. Again, thinking 32 subjects, we can look at a chart to know where it's at. But we know that one would have had to have been on the bottom left, right? That's where that had to have been positioned in order for this to happen. Really good question. Let's look at our next one. We're hanging out with eBay. $42. Would you place a bid on this? Yeah, we'd buy this? Who says I would buy this? Yeah, this looks good. I take this home, put it in my collection. Who says, not a chance, Bianca, you can't fool me? Couple people. Those of you that like it, or those of you that don't like it, I'm going to show you the back. Does your opinion change? Or not?
I would not buy that.
You would not buy that. Who says I would buy it? I've seen both sides, I'm good with it. It's a good note.
I'll make the argument for it.
Go. Yeah.
Since the ink is all in different places, then it could be that the ink was running out on the face and the back print, but the fact that the front and back are both the same, but I don't see how they would be able to fade the ink unless it was like printed like on like construction paper.
So we're thinking possibly this could be an insufficient inking error affecting both sides. Wow, it is time to buy a lottery ticket, right? I mean, oh my goodness, the statistical probability, because of exactly what you just said, these are being fed from different ink reservoirs. These vats are different. So,
They're same size, right?
I'm sorry?
But you said they're the same size.
Yeah, they would be the same, yep.
So if you're taking a gallon of milk and you're pouring X amount of cups,
Sure.
on this side of the table, you take another gallon of milk, you're gonna pour the same amount, and at the end, there's gonna be not much in both
Yeah.
jugs at the end, and if it needs a refill, they would both sort of need it at the same time.
At the same time?
Or a new jug of milk.
Okay, yep.
Is it possible that someone took a legitimate note, chemically got rid of the third printing, reduced the brightness in the front and the back, and then ran it through the laser printer?
And reapplied the serial numbers and seals? Is it possible? Anything is possible, right?
It's bad. I mean, that's,
Yeah.
it looks bad.
So is that what happened on this note? And that's the question I'm going to answer. That's a good hypothesis, right? Because we could say we've washed it out entirely, but now we need to reapply these. How come we know that the third printing, which we've really talked about and have learned, is 3 and 4, or 3A and 3B? So how come that looks okay? That looks unaffected, as intended. But we have both sides affected. Why? How? Chemical alteration. Why are the serial numbers and seals so dark? Because they used a paintbrush. Right? That's the answer. They just avoided the areas. So they did not fully, submerge this in a chemical. In that case, we would see very similar patterns affecting all of our prints. However, through cautious and careful and meticulous application of the chemical, that is why we see the back as well as the face independently affected.
Somebody spent their time to do this.
That's what I.
They did, yeah. I know, right? It's wild. The other thing that could be standing out to you, and I hope should be standing out to you, we talked about surface disturbance. We talked about abrasion. I would guess, obviously these are just screenshots from eBay, but I would guess if I had this note in my hand and I had the opportunity to kind of rub my fingers over it like this, there's gonna be a texture. It's gonna be a little bit kind of pilly, if you will. It just doesn't look right, okay? Could both of them run out at the same time? Sure. Statistically improbable, right? Let's take a peek and see about this one. What do we think here? Who says I'd buy this one, Bianca? This is pretty cool. 2 seals overlapping? Yep. Put it in my collection. Who says, nope, that doesn't make sense from what I've learned? Why not? Who wants to tell me why it doesn't make sense from what we've learned? Yep.
Because the rest of the black ink is not offset.
Tell me what you mean by the rest of the black ink. Be more specific.
I forget the name, but like the plate number and like the 12.
Yeah, these 12s are district designators. Exactly right. Our black overprint is applied at the same time. So if in fact we were going to have that shift or that misalignment, it wouldn't just be the seal. Everything would have to be shifted over. Yep.
And it's like kind of scrubbed.
Yeah. Surface disturbance, right? That one stands out like a sore thumb. Tried to make them a little bit more apparent as we move through. This one is, again, incredibly popular. You're going to see a lot of these out there, particularly if you stay with the hobby and really focus on error notes. I was giving this talk a couple months ago at the Michigan State show, and Joe Bowling was in the audience. And those of you that know Joe know that he is just an absolute wealth of knowledge, brings a lot of experience, and it was really cool. So he said that he actually watched someone do this. So they call these magician notes. And I've heard the story, but I've never seen anybody do it. And what they do is they will put a chemical on their thumb, and they will quite literally press down and transfer it over. I've never seen it happen in person, but he was in the audience and he was able to share a really, really cool story. If you see these, and I promise you, you will, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Don't walk away, run away. Absolutely sprint. It doesn't make sense because of what you said. Our district designators are where they're supposed to be. How could that be? It can't be. So you will sometimes see this advertised as a magician's note, because magicians will use this as part of their trick, as part of their show, and they will quite literally transfer that seal over. So with that being said, a lot of times when you see these, you're going to see part of a thumbprint on there as well too. Another way to start to make sense. Why would there be a thumbprint on a BEP note? Those are done with printing plates. Now, the next one I'm going to show you also comes from eBay, and if you're not entirely sure what we're looking at the back here. We're looking at the left-hand side, kind of the left third, on a questionable ink smear. What do we think about this? It's in a PCGS holder. Does that give us all the confidence we need? No? We don't like it? Do we like it? Who says I'd buy it? It looks like a good ink smear to me. It's in a PCGS holder. I'm feeling comfortable and confident.
I'd buy it, it's certified, but I could be fooled.
Do you think the graders ever make mistakes?
Is that an over ink or?
So it's an ink smear. Yep.
Way too much ink.
Way too much ink. Yep, that's what would put it in the error category. What don't we like about this?
You got ink smear on both sides.
It's not mentioned on the holder, on the label of the holder.
Not mentioned as an ink smear on the holder.
It's also an insufficient ink on the third print also.
Talking about the seal there.
Yeah, which would be weird.
Looking a little bit light, doesn't quite look great. So I put this in here obviously for a reason. Each note was chosen with intent. And the reason being is that this one allows us to look into it a little bit deeper. If we look on either PMG or PCGS, we can verify our cert numbers. This note is genuine. They just unfortunately provided us terrible images of it. So I went to PCGS and I looked at the cert number, and that's where we're at. One thing just to wrap it up really quick, of course we talked about some ways to avoid buying bad errors. Should you have any questions, I am around. I'm around for the whole week. I'll be at table 226, but I really encourage you to go out on the Bourse floor, find some error notes, have fun. If you have questions, you know where to find me, but appreciate everybody being here and enjoy the show.